Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, The Quiet Ones. This is a Hammer production of the new Hammer films that have been putting out films recently. The thing that's very essential to having a horror movie work with having very few characters is establishing those characters and giving you some kind of insight into who they are, even if it's briefly, so that when they start getting killed off, you kind of care and are at least invested in it. The Quiet Ones manages not to really do this at all. It doesn't have character moments. It just keeps going on with a plot, keeps chugging along and making the characters do things and jumping to conclusions, making it kind of a haunted house or a horror film that just decided to skip over all the parts to make the audience care about it and just pretend that all the spooks and the scares are really what will get you into it, when a finer genre director would really understand what this film needed. A professor at Oxford played by Jared Harris, and he's doing research into this girl who has a spirit named Evie who is haunting her, and he's trying to prove that it either isn't real or that it is real, and that it's a self-manifestation. And he uses two students and a cameraman from the AV department who has a film camera, and they're researching it, and then Oxford kicks them out and they go into a house in the middle of nowhere in England. They go there and do experiments and try to bring out her demon and investigate what's going on, and they soon realize they're in for more than they bargained for. Under the supervision of a good genre director and maybe like a very good rewrite, this could work. It's not really the concept or the plot that's really hindering this movie, it's clearly the execution. You could do something with the Jared Harris character, how he's clearly a little crazy, and whether or not he's doing a hoax or not, or this girl is really possessed by this demon. The film kind of decides to do both and ends up doing it in a way that's pretty boring, and by the end you've kind of had it with the movie at that point, and you kind of don't really care who the Quiet Ones are, although it doesn't really describe the movie very well, except for somebody says that the people who follow this professor are the Quiet Ones, and it's really a throwaway line and it doesn't need to be in the movie, and I don't know why it's called this, but it doesn't really understand what it's trying to do, what its point is. Sometimes with horror movies, they're so invested in being a horror movie, with the scares, with the spookiness, with the crazy demon. In a lot of ways, Alien or more successful Hammer films from the past work this a lot better, where you give each character a little thing and you know them very well. And there's certain characters in this. Sam Claflin, who was the guy, I don't remember his name, but he played Brian and he was in the Hunger Games. You'd think he would have a better character, but you don't really know him other than boyfriend and guy who works machinery. Because of things like that, it makes it a very dry horror film experience, and they seem to be interested in the spookiness and the giving it a strange ambiance that oddly sort of works because of the spooky music, but doesn't really go anywhere, so it doesn't really work. Carpenter, when he made Halloween, those characters had moments where they just hung out and talked about things that weren't Michael Myers, so you get to know them a little. This is just like, hey, we're doing these crazy experiments, let's like only talk about that. I don't know what any of these people's interests are whatsoever. The girl, you understand she has problems, so why is she helping with kind of this psychiatric experiment, which seems a little off. And they don't really get into how Jared Harris, his professor character, is kind of crazy. They do, but they don't really flesh it out, and they're in a haunted house. There's so much they could really do with this, but they don't do that because they're too obsessed with the plot to really build these characters and give you kind of a creepy ambiance through that. In some way, this represents the Hammer films of the past, because Jared Harris's character kind of represents somebody who like Peter Cushing would play in the old Hammer movies, and so I kind of think that's kind of cool, but this doesn't remind me of a Hammer film that I like actually enjoy. When I've seen a bunch of Hammer films in a row and you're like, I don't know, this is one, and you don't really enjoy it and you kind of are spacing out through it. This is one of those. So I guess Hammer succeeded in making a Hammer movie again, but not one that like I really ever want to watch again or think is at all interesting. I know it's a bad movie when I'm thinking of other movies and how they did it better, or I'm thinking of other horror movies completely unrelated. I was thinking about how Oculus was a much better movie because it at least was interesting. It actually had some perspective to the film. This film kind of switches perspectives, and since the character characters aren't very well established, and you're switching perspectives in such a bland way. The best developed characters is the crazy girl they're examining and the camera guy. It's just kind of a bad genre piece, a bad horror movie with underdeveloped characters that cares more about having some scary scenes in there. If this film had developed some of these ideas rather than have the characters talk about them and give you glimpses of them, like a lot of bad movies, it's dedicated to a stupid plot that the film never really gets you to care about, and doesn't even seem to want to get you to care about it, just expects you to fall into it and get really invested. You want to be a mainstream film for the masses, for everyone to see. You don't actually want to like be their friend and get them into it, and acting like it's trying to be made in like a difficult way for some artistic reason is absolute crap. This film just doesn't really work as a mainstream horror film, or a horror film in general. It just doesn't really even want to work. You know, it just wants to go on its basic genre horrorness in kind of the worst plotted out way. The Quiet Ones is a film that definitely wants to be a horror film, but it doesn't really aspire to do anything more with the characters more than just empty vessels in a horror movie, and a mishmash of a horror movie that doesn't really know what it's doing. So if you have seen The Quiet Ones and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to.